and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. Thursday, one more day till Friday. Oh, man. Great week. The takes are only getting better as the year goes on. Great Thursday night football matchup tonight between the Lions and the Packers. It's going to be the best Thursday night football game of the year. Something, though, that is not great and hasn't been great really at all this year is the Indiana Pacers. So they lost 2 nights ago to the Toronto Raptors, who aren't very good. And then last night on the road, they go to play against the Brooklyn Nets, and they lose 99-90. And Tony East of Locked On Pacers, he's going to join me at 11 o'clock, and we're going to talk about the Pacers and just all of the struggles that they've had. This is Pacers week because the Colts don't play on Sunday. No one said anything dumb. You know, Zaire Franklin said his thing yesterday, but I don't know. That's just him talking, whatever. And so, we're just talking a lot of Pacers this week, a lot of basketball in general. So yesterday I talked quite a bit about the Pacers and the struggles that they've had on defense because they've had many, many struggles on defense. Last night, though, was not the case. They played pretty solid defense last night, especially in the second half. Holding a team in the NBA to under 100 points is quite phenomenal, honestly. But the Pacers only scored 90 points, which for them isn't good. For me, though, it's perfect because I wanted to talk about their offensive struggles today anyway, and it's perfect for me. So the Pacers' offense this year hasn't been anywhere near as good as it was last year. It is, in all honesty, it's been bad. Last year, the Indiana Pacers led the NBA in scoring at 123 points per game. This year, they're only averaging 113 points per game. That is a differential of 10 points per game. Their offensive rating last year was second in the NBA at 120.5. And for those who don't know, offensive rating is basically just how many points you score per 100 possessions. Okay. So last year, Pacers offense was second in the NBA in offensive rating at 120.5 points per game, or points per 100 possessions, excuse me. This year, their offensive rating is ranked 22nd, and it's only 111 points per 100 possessions. That is a differential of 9, almost 10 points per 100 possessions. And look, defense is still, I think, the biggest issue for the Pacers. But this offense has its flaws as well. And honestly, it's quite puzzling because they have plenty of offensive talent. Okay, between Tyrese Halliburton and Benedict Mathurin and Miles Turner and Pascal Siakam, I would argue that those are the 4 best offensive players on this Pacers team. And all 4 of those guys have played this year. It's not like they've been missing Siakam or Mathurin or anybody like that. Like all 4 of those guys, the 4 best offensive players for the Pacers, have all been healthy this year. Okay, and in addition to that, their best bench scorer, TJ McConnell, has been healthy this year as well. So why are the Pacers so much worse on the offensive end of the floor? Why are they so much worse? Why are they below average? Because that's where their numbers say that they're at. And this is the part where I would hammer home the Tyrese Halliburton hasn't been very good point, but I feel like I've talked about that more than enough through the first quarter of the Pacers season. So I want to look at and talk about other things that are obviously impacted by Tyrese Halliburton, but aren't just him. Okay, so when we look at the Pacers are the 14th best three-point shooting team in the NBA this year from a percentage standpoint. They're shooting just under 37% from three. They're at 36.7% from downtown on 33 attempts per game, which is the 5th lowest mark in the NBA. Last year, they shot it a little bit better from three. They were at 37.5%, so, less than a 1% difference. But the difference is that they shot more threes last year per game. Last year, they were ninth in the NBA in three-pointers attempted per game at 38 attempts a night. This year, they're at 33. And that 38 attempts a night was the 15th most in the NBA. That matters. The Pacers shot the ball slightly better from three last year on 5 more attempts per game. And I don't know how much of the NBA you have watched, but if you've watched an NBA game in the last, 5 or 6 years, then you know that the NBA has become primarily about your ability to shoot the basketball from three, because three is worth more than two, and all of those things. Okay? So I don't think that the Pacers are shooting the ball enough. Okay? And look, 33 attempts per game is a lot. Do you remember when Steph Curry and the Warriors won their first title way back in 2015, and Steph Curry should have been the finals MVP, but because Andre Iguodala defended LeBron James poorly, he won it. Do you remember that? I remember it very well. And I remember going into those playoffs, the narrative around the Warriors was they shoot too many threes. You can't win championships as a jump shooting team. All that came out. And as we've learned, that's simply not true. That team, that Warriors team, a decade ago, would be last in the NBA today in three-pointers attempted per game. The Boston Celtics, the best team in the NBA, they lead the NBA in three-pointers attempted per game at 51. That is almost double the number of threes that the Warriors take, that the Warriors took per game a decade ago when they won their first title with Steph Curry, and everyone said that they couldn't win a title because they take too many threes. So when I look at the Pacers, and when you look at the best teams in the NBA and the teams that are really good, you know who shoots a lot of threes? Cleveland. You know who else shoots a lot of threes? Boston, the Thunder. The best teams in the NBA take and make a lot of three-point shots. And when I look at this Indiana Pacers team, they have plenty of guys that are more than capable of knocking down an open three-point shot. Jarris Walker's at 40% on the year. Tyrese Halliburton is a 40% career three-point shooter. Miles Turner and Pascal Siakam are both shooting over 40% from three this year. And you could just continue to go down the list. Mathurin shot it well from three this year. Really, the only guy on the Pacers that plays a legitimate amount of minutes that can't, or you don't want shooting a bunch of threes is TJ McConnell, right? So I don't think that the Pacers have done a good enough job this year, or I thought they did a better job last year of generating open looks from three. I don't think that they've done that as much this year. And in addition to that, so I think that's part of why the scoring for the Pacers is down this year. Otter Creek with a great stat from last night. The Pacers were 8 of 33 from three last night. So got to shoot the ball a little bit better in that regard. And then the Pacers also need more production from their bench. They haven't had that this year. That was something that they had all year last year, right? Like the second unit was, there's obviously a bit of a drop off, but it was still really good. Like the Pacers' second unit was better than everyone else's. And that just hasn't been the case this year. Last year, the Pacers had 9 players on their playoff roster that averaged 9 points per game or more. This year, they only have 7. Okay, and then in addition to that, in addition to the depth not scoring as much as it did last year, this year it's been a lot of TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin. Guys like Jarris Walker need to play better. Okay, when Ben Shepherd comes back, he's going to hopefully contribute in that regard as well. Aaron Nesmith, whether he starts or they move Mathurin to the bench, that will help the depth. But with what they've had so far this year, the depth isn't scoring the basketball at the same rate that they were last year. And then you throw in the fact that the starters haven't scored as much as they did last year. Obviously, Halliburton's scoring's down because it's been very well documented on this show, the struggles that he's had this year. But Miles Turner's scoring is down. Pascal Siakam's scoring is down. And Jalen Smith, one of the backup bigs last year, he averaged 10 points per game in the 61 games that he played. He's gone. And the guy that was supposed to replace him, James Wiseman, guess what he did? He tore his Achilles like 5 minutes into the season, right? And then the other backup center, Isaiah Jackson, tore his Achilles as well. And so they've just completely lost the production from the backup center that they had last year. And then you throw in the fact that Aaron Nesmith, who was the Pacers' best three-point shooter last year and had been so far through this year before he got hurt, which to be fair, he got hurt relatively early, he was shooting 54% from three. Like the Pacers are missing him. And so when you look at the lack of scoring, there's several things that play into it. A bunch of the starters aren't scoring at the same rate that they were last year. The bench hasn't been good. There's been injuries to guys like Ben Shepherd and Aaron Nesmith, guys that when they come back, they will contribute and they will help the scoring. But they've got all those issues from just a simple putting the ball in the basket standpoint. But the biggest thing that is keeping the Pacers from winning these close games, like, look, they lost 99-90 last night. That's a 3-possession game. The Pacers are turning the ball over more this year than they did last year, and they aren't generating assists at the same clip that they were last year as compared to this year. I think that is the biggest issue. This year, the Indiana Pacers are 16th in the NBA, so slightly below average in the assist to turnover ratio across the league at 1.8, which is good. Okay, it's good. No, it's not. It's not good. It's average. Okay, that is a very average number. Last year, the Pacers led the NBA in assist to turnover ratio at 2.38. They're just simply turning the basketball over way too much. And they aren't generating, and this goes back to the open threes point that I made earlier, they aren't helping each other generate enough good open looks. And I think part of that is a personnel thing, right? Because like they had, Pascal Siakam for the second half of last year. They've had him all year this year. And when he showed up, they gave him more opportunities to isolate. Whereas before Pascal Siakam was here, the Pacers didn't really have anyone that they were like, here's the ball on an island, go score. It was a very team-oriented game. And then you've got a guy in Benedict Mathurin, who I love, by the way. This isn't, an anti-Mathurin or an anti-Siakam take. This is just the reality of what it's like having these guys on your team. And then you've got a guy in Benedict Mathurin who is slowly starting to emerge as this awesome player who can score in one-on-one scenarios and can get by guys and get downhill and get to the free throw line and do those things. And so you're trying to give him opportunities to do that as well. And so because of that, the assist numbers are down. And the other thing about Mathurin and Siakam is they aren't going to isolate to get a three-point shot. They're isolating to either get to the rim, or for Siakam, he wants to take that elbow jumper, which is fine. 2 points is 2 points. And so last year, the Pacers were 9th in turnovers per game in the NBA. This year, they're 17th. That's not very good. They're turning the ball over more than they were last year. And the drop from 9th last year to 17th this year is just a difference of 2 turnovers per game, which doesn't sound like a lot. Okay? It doesn't. But when you realize that their net rating, so the difference between their offensive and defensive rating, which is just points allowed and points scored per 100 possessions, is -5. That's 2 possessions. So when I look at the Pacers and I look at the rest of their season, right? Because we're a quarter of the way through it. We got 60 games left. It feels like there's time to turn things around. But as Halliburton said after their loss to the Raptors, he's like, it's hard to get back to 500. Like, it's hard to win games. And so, do they have time? Yes, but there needs to be this sense of urgency. I think that when the Pacers get healthy, when Ben Shepherd comes back, one of the better defenders on this roster, when Aaron Nesmith comes back, the best defender on this roster, and 2 guys that really shoot the ball well from 3 in both Shepherd and Nesmith, when those guys come back, if the Pacers can stop turning the basketball over, and if they can play defense a little bit better, which will help when Ben Shepherd and Aaron Nesmith come back, and they can just generate a few more good looks from 3 per game, they will be fine. Okay, because I was looking at the pace numbers last night. That was something that, Tony East and I had talked about probably about 10 or 11 games into the season. The Pacers are now up to 7th in the NBA in pace. Okay, last year they were second at like 102 possessions per game. This year they're 7th at 100 possessions per game. So the pace has picked up here recently for the Pacers. They just have to generate a few more open good looks from three, stop turning the ball over, and get healthy. Okay, so which feels like a lot, but I don't think that it is. I think Aaron Nesmith and Ben Shepherd solve a lot of the problems that this Pacers team has had offensively and even some defensively throughout this season. And so Tony East, he's going to join me here at 11 o'clock, and I can't wait. Love it when he comes on. He always does a fantastic job. I've got just a ton of stuff to get to today. Once again, the Colts are on a bye week, which is really just, it's a bit of a buzzkill. Like, I love talking about the Colts on Thursdays and Fridays. I need for Zaire Franklin to come out and say that Anthony Richardson's like the MVP or something. I need them to give me something to talk about, even though in their best interest, they probably should not, because if they give me something to talk about, then it won't be great. So anyway, no Colts on Sunday, no IU football on Saturday. Indiana basketball beat Sam Houston State earlier in the week. They're playing Minnesota on Monday. Just got the confirmation. Coach Johnson of Minnesota, they got crushed last night by Michigan State. He's set to come on Dan's show tomorrow at 12:30, which is just going to be an absolute blast. Cannot wait to have Coach Johnson on Dan's show tomorrow. But once again, Tony East on my show today at 11 to talk Pacers. And since Indiana football isn't playing on Saturday, and there are a couple big college football games, right? We got conference championships. I want to talk about conference championship games and something that the committee said about them that I'm not sure that I believe them on or really agree with them with if they are telling the truth. I'm going to tell you what this is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Welcome back to The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. We've got a great weekend in store. I mean, like, obviously we have the NFL, which is cool. We've got college football, conference championship games on Saturday. Actually, no. Starting tomorrow night, we get Boise State, UNLV. The winner advances to the college football playoff, which I cannot wait to see. So the College Football Playoff Committee came out and made it a point to say that the conference championship games will not impact the way that they rank teams, which is, that's great. That's cool. But I don't know. First and foremost, I don't know if I believe them or not. Secondly, I don't know if they're right when they say that conference championship games should not impact the rankings. Okay, honestly, no. I don't believe them. I think that the results of these conference championship games are going to impact the rankings because, obviously, as I talked about yesterday, the College Football Playoff Committee just does whatever they want to, which I don't really have a problem with as long as they get it right. And the idea that conference championship games will not impact the rankings means that if UNLV beats Boise State, are they really going to leave Boise State in the top 12? I have a hard time believing that. And if that's not the case, or if that's not the case, and if UNLV beats Boise State and they move Boise State out, then I would be totally in favor of that because not every conference championship game is the same. It's just not. Okay? In the SEC championship game, the conference championship game that just means more. If you wanted to tell me that the loser of Texas and Georgia would not be impacted that much by the results of the conference championship game, then I would believe you and I would agree with that premise. If you wanted to tell me that the loser of Oregon and Penn State in the Big Ten championship game, if you wanted to tell me that they wouldn't be impacted that much by, losing that game, then I would completely buy into that because it's number 1 against number 3 in the country. Okay, like you shouldn't lose your spot in the CFP if you're Penn State or Oregon if you lose a neutral site game to the first or third best team in the country. Like that makes sense to me. But if Boise State loses to UNLV, they should be left out of the college football playoff, and they should not hold on to that number 10 ranking that they had, that they were given on Tuesday. Right. And then here's why I bring this up. SMU plays Clemson in the ACC title game on Saturday night. And I'm just not convinced that if Clemson beats SMU, that the committee is going to leave both SMU and Clemson in the college football playoff. I think that if Clemson beats SMU, then they are going to remove SMU from the top 12, and they will miss the college football playoff. And people are going to be absolutely outraged by this, because if that happens, then that will mean that Alabama, the team that everybody hates, the team that went 9-3 and is out of the SEC, that means Alabama would get in over SMU, who went undefeated in their conference during the regular season and played in their conference championship game, right? And you're going to get on Twitter and there's going to be these people grandstanding about, I guess it's a bad thing to play in your conference championship game. People are going to be upset. But as I said earlier, all conference championship games are not the same. They aren't. They never have been, and they never will be. Let's look at SMU, because I firmly believe that if SMU loses to Clemson on Saturday night, they should be left out of the playoff in order to put Alabama in. Because when you look at the resumes, Alabama's is head and shoulders above SMU. And we already saw this exact same college football playoff committee give Alabama the nod over a 2-loss ACC team with a weak schedule. Right? That's who Miami was, a 2-loss ACC team with a weak schedule. and they gave Alabama the nod over them. SMU and Miami are, dare I say, the same. They're very similar. High-powered offenses that score a whole bunch of points. Defense can be questioned at times. And they both played incredibly weak schedules. Miami and SMU both have 0 ranked wins on the year, or 0 wins over teams that finished ranked on the year. If SMU loses to Clemson, then very similar to Miami, they will have lost they would have lost the 2 games against the 2 best opponents that they've played all year. SMU lost earlier in the year to BYU, and if they lose on Saturday night, then they'll have also lost to Clemson, the only 2 ranked games that they would have played all year. And then you look at Alabama. Why did the committee give Alabama the nod over Miami? Because Alabama had more ranked wins. And it would be the exact same thing here with Alabama and SMU. Alabama would have three ranked wins to SMU 0. Seriously, like that is the reality of it. Like, SMU's best wins over Louisville and Duke, just like how Miami's best wins were over Louisville and Duke, simply do not compare. Like, they are miles away from Alabama's 2 best wins over South Carolina, who had a case to be in the college football playoff, and Georgia, arguably the best team in the country. And they could very easily use the same rationale that kept Miami out of the playoff to drop SMU below Alabama if they lose to Clemson on Saturday. And once again, if this happens, I would be in favor of it. If you don't, SMU has an opportunity on Saturday to prove that they belong by beating a single ranked team. Alabama has already proved that they belong because they beat Georgia and they beat South Carolina and they beat Missouri and they went on the road to LSU and crushed LSU. Once again, same thing with Miami. Alabama's 4th best win over Miami is currently better than, SMU's best win over Louisville or Duke, whoever you think's better between those 2 teams. I would take LSU over both of those 2 teams. If SMU loses, I am going to be incredibly intrigued to see how the College Football Playoff Committee deals with Alabama and SMU, because I think it's going to be interesting. Personally, because I always root in the interest of my show, I hope that they boost Alabama in front of SMU. I hope that they dropped SMU below Alabama. I think it would just be the funniest thing ever. I'd be on Twitter. I wouldn't even tweet. I would just scroll. I would just search Alabama, SMU, put it up there in the search bar, hit enter, and then just watch people melt down. Because you know that they will. There'll be people screaming SEC bias, even though I think there's been more Big Ten bias than SEC bias in this year's rankings, but that's beside the point. And, they'd be screaming and yelling about Alabama and brand bias and all these things. And I would just find it absolutely hilarious. So because of that, I am rooting for Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers on Saturday night because I want chaos, because chaos is great for the Real Jonathan Smith Show and the Dan Dockett Show, which is on from noon to 3, which you should listen to today. Download that Indie Sports Ticket app so that you can listen to it. Anyway, I'm going to stay with the SEC here. Now, usually when it comes to college basketball, I'm talking Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten. Oregon's good. Wisconsin's good. Indiana should be good, but we'll see what happens with them. Purdue's really good. I'm going to soft launch this take. I don't know if I really believe this yet. I want to see a little bit more before I put my stake in the ground, or before I plant my flag at midcourt and firmly believe this. The SEC won the SEC versus ACC Challenge 14 games to 2. Shout out to the Arkansas Razorbacks who went on the road and beat Miami the other night. Boogie Fland, that dude's really good. Anyway, SEC wins the SEC ACC Challenge 14 games to 2. And the 2 teams that lost for the SEC might be the 2 best teams in the conference in Kentucky and Auburn. And I bring this up to say that this is why it's important to be great at football, because the money that you make from football Like, yeah, sure, you could just reinvest all of it into football, but at some point you look up and you're like, we have the newest everything and we have extra money just sitting here. What do we do with it? We invest that money in the basketball program. That and like when you look at the SEC and this slow rise from what was an average basketball conference was consistently behind the ACC and the Big Ten, we have seen them rise to a point where you can make a real argument, and I think I believe this. I don't know yet. Where you can make a real argument that they are the best basketball conference in the country this year. They are deep and they are loaded, and I think a large part of that is because they've been so good at football for so long, and they've made so much money in the football world that they're able to spend some of that football revenue on their basketball programs, which allows you to hire better coaches. And look, usually when you have better coaches, you win more games. Okay. Now, before I just, like I said, plant my flag at midcourt and say that the SEC is the best basketball conference in the land, it's still early. I want to see more from the Big Ten because the Big Ten is consistently really good at basketball. I would argue that basketball is the sport of the Midwest. Maybe that's wrong. I don't know. You can let me know. Head over to YouTube, Indie Sports Ticket, subscribe, jump in the chat and let me know if that's true or not. But I'm just not convinced that the Big Ten is as deep as the SEC, and I'm not convinced that the top is as good as the SEC. Through, the non-conference schedule, I think Illinois, Purdue, Wisconsin, and Oregon are the four best teams in the Big Ten right now. Like, those are four really good teams. And outside of that, I'm just not sure. Like, Indiana and Rutgers are extremely talented, and you would think that they're going to win a lot of games. Michigan State, they're going to be good because it's Tom Izzo, and I'm just never, ever, ever going to bet against Michigan State and Tom Izzo. I look at Michigan, like they went on the road and beat Wisconsin just the other night. And then you got Ohio State, who I think is going to be good. And then you got Nebraska. I love Fred Hoiberg. I think he's one of the best coaches in all of college hoops. But I just don't know yet. So I'm at this point where I really want to crown the SEC. I do. Just honestly, I do. But the Big Ten is good as well. I do think that when March Madness rolls around, we're going to have the majority of the teams from the Big Ten and from the SEC, because these appear. And then again, it's early. Think things are going to change. As of right now, those two conferences appear to be better than every other conference, and I think the SEC is better than the Big Ten just because of the depth throughout the conference. Okay, and I think that I just know more at this point in the year because of scheduling and things like that the SEC is going to be really good. So we'll see. We've got Thursday night football tonight. It's going to be an absolute blast. No Colts on Sunday, which makes me sad. No IU football on Saturday, which makes me sad, but I will get over it. And, I'm not very good, even in real life, at talking about myself on the radio. Like, I'm very good at expressing my opinions about the Pacers and the Colts and the college football playoff and all of these different things, right? But I like just talking about myself straight up. I'm terrible at it. Not very good at it. But today is my birthday. I turned 25. If you're sitting in your car or at home, or maybe you're watching on YouTube or whatever, and you're like, geez, Jonathan's making a lot of sense today. It's because my frontal lobe, as of today, completely developed. So watch out now. The takes are only going to get better from here. And I was like, I wanted to do something themed with 25. So when we come back here in about 4 minutes, I'm going to do my NBA 25 and 5. We're about a quarter of the way through the year for every team. And I think that there's 5 teams that can win an NBA title this year. And then I think there's 25 teams that are incapable of winning one. And I've tiered them all together. And when Tony East comes on here in about 25 minutes, I'm going to run some of these things by him. And it's going to be good. So Tony East coming up at 11. We're going to talk Pacers and this NBA 25 and 5 list that I've put together in honor of my 25th birthday, which I'm going to give you those tiers and those teams when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
More winners, more often. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. I'm so excited to do this. NBA 25-5 in honor of my 25th birthday. These are the 25 teams that will not or cannot, as of right now, we're a quarter of the way through the year, win an NBA title. And the 5 teams that can, I put them all in tiers. Let's start at the bottom with just bad teams. Okay, the Wizards, they're tanking for Cooper Flagg. They're awful. Okay, the Hornets, they're terrible. They have LaMelo Ball, who is a social media star by, every standard measurement, really cool highlights, all that stuff, but he's not a winning player. He doesn't play defense, and he takes a lot of shots. Anyway, next, the Raptors, they're bad. They have Scotty Barnes, but they need a lot more. The Jazz are like the Wizards, also tanking for Cooper Flagg. The Trailblazers have a couple of interesting pieces. They've got a couple players that I like. Scoot Henderson's interesting. Shaedon Sharpe. I remember the year that the Pacers drafted Benedict Mathurin. I was like, no, let's draft Shaedon Sharpe. And, the Pacers didn't listen to me. And that's probably a good thing so far, given what we've seen from Mathurin in this system. So all those teams, though, are bad. No way around it. My next tier up is bad but interesting. Okay, so this is the 76ers, Pacers, Bulls, Heat, Kings, Pelicans, and Lakers. So the 76ers are bad because Joel Embiid hasn't played this year, or he has. He's played like 4 games, right? And if he starts to play, then they could be really good, but he hasn't. And then shout out to John Buzzard with this stat. Paul George has done more podcast episodes this basketball season than he has played in NBA games, which is crazy because I thought that when, Paul George decided to do his podcast, that he was going to be like full-time NBA player, part-time podcaster, but that's actually not the case. He's full-time podcaster, part-time NBA player. That sounds like a great gig. Yo, Pacers, if you guys are listening and you want to sign me, I would love to be like a part-time NBA player and then like a full-time radio guy. I think that would actually be an absolute blast. So Pacers, hit me up if that interests you. Next on the bad but interesting tier is the Pacers, because the Pacers ceiling is high. The issue is they aren't playing well enough right now on offense. Halliburton's not playing well. They aren't getting stops. They've been extremely banged up. I'm sure people from around the league are looking at the Pacers like, what is going on? And the people that have been paying attention know that part of it has been injuries, and everyone knows that part of it's because Halliburton hasn't been as good as he was last year. But I think everyone also knows that when it comes to the Pacers, that they are more than capable of winning a lot of games. Halliburton's more than capable of getting back on track. And when they get healthy, they will be better. So Pacers, as of right now, they're bad, but we'll see what happens as the year progresses. They're still an interesting team. Next, the Bulls. The Bulls are not very good, but they're interesting. Lonzo Ball, that's a guy that they can trade. He's playing again. Zach LaVine's been on the trading block for like the last 2 or 3 years, and everyone's just kind of waiting on them to trade him, and I'm kind of waiting on the same thing as well. So that's why they're interesting. The Heat, pretty similar. They're underachieving once again. And I saw rumors the other day, once again, rumors not reporting this, that they're shopping Jimmy Butler. Me personally, I like Jimmy Butler. I think he's tough. I think he plays hard, but he's also a lot of drama. I don't think that I'd want to get in on the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes. Next, on this bad but interesting tier, the Kings. They invested in DeMar DeRozan in the offseason, and everyone got super excited. And I was like, why are we excited about the Kings adding a mid-30-year-old superstar, that's in quotes, who doesn't take threes and only takes mid-range jumpers and dribbles the air out of the ball? Like, why did we think that guy was going to make the Kings so much better? And so they're interesting because they've got good players that just don't fit. And when the trade deadline rolls around, I'm very interested to see if they part ways with any of those guys. Next, the Pelicans, they're good when their star is healthy. The issue is Zion is yet to figure out that Twinkies and honey buns are not a good diet for an NBA player. Zion is yet to figure out that once you turn 18, your metabolism changes. It slows down quite a bit. So you can't just eat Twinkies and honey buns. You got to go eat like real food. He hasn't figured that out yet. He's too busy hitting up these OnlyFans models as well. So if Zion ever figures his crap out, they'll have a chance to turn their season around, but I don't think that that's going to happen. Next, the Lakers. And they're interesting just because they have LeBron, but they're bad. I saw a tweet last night of someone saying, we need to have a conversation about JJ Redick. I was like, I don't know. They've been bad ever since the bubble, and they've had 3 different coaches. Like, I don't think it's the coach at this point. I think it's the players on the roster aren't very good. So the Lakers close out that tier of bad but interesting. Next tier, entertaining but not a threat. There's the Hawks, Magic, Suns, Spurs, Pistons, Nets, Timberwolves, and Clippers. The Hawks, they're the 6th seed in the East right now. And I love watching them play because they've got 3 wings that are tall, long, play defense, and can score in some capacity between Jalen Johnson, who's awesome, the number 1 overall pick, the least anticipated number 1 overall pick since Anthony Bennett 10 years ago, Zachary Richelet from France. He's much better than I think people realize. He can defend. He shoots the ball well. Good player. I don't know if he's ever going to be a great player, but I think he'll be a good player who plays in the league for 8 to 10 years. That's what he looks like so far through 20 games. Dyson Daniels leading the NBA in steals. I mean, he's a big, tall, long guard from Australia who defends his butt off. Okay. Can't shoot, doesn't give you much on offense, but defensively, he's good. They play hard. Plus, they've got a guy in Trae Young who's good for a couple highlights every night. Next team that's entertaining but not a threat. I have the Magic. They're a lot of fun right now, but I just want to see what they look like when Paolo comes back. If they keep rolling, then I will undoubtedly move them up a tier, maybe 2. Next, the Suns, a lot of talent. Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker. But there's also a major lack of depth on that roster, so it's kind of hard to move them any higher. Next, you got the Spurs. They're so much fun to watch. Wemby still figuring things out, but he's still better than what he was last year. I think a large part of that is because they have Chris Paul. Chris Paul just shows up and wins everywhere. Like, that's just what he does. Like, when Chris Paul's playing point guard for the Spurs and he's on the floor, they look organized, which is an upgrade from what they looked like last year, where they had a bunch of guards who didn't know how to throw an entry pass to a 7'4" guy. Anyway, the Pistons are on this tier as well. They finally have a competent coach. Monty Williams, not a good coach. That's why he's coaching high school basketball right now. Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham, ton of fun to watch. 2 really good young Ivy's this really explosive guard. You remember him at Purdue. And Cade Cunningham is just this methodical scorer and very much a real point guard. The Nets, they have a bunch of lesser-known guys, but they play incredibly hard. The Timberwolves had the fastest rising. The Timberwolves also have them here. They have the fastest rising star in the NBA with Anthony Edwards, but losing Karl Anthony Towns is hurting them. They don't have enough shooting or offense without him. Late in games, it's like, here you go, Anthony, go score. And then he does his best to go score. Julius Randle just isn't really cutting it for them. The Clippers, they're entertaining. They've won, I think they're like 15-9. Maybe they're 14-10, somewhere in there. They have James Harden. And I'm not going to lie, it's kind of fun reminiscing about his time in Houston whenever I watch him play, because he just dribbles like crazy, and then he's going to chuck up a 3. It's awesome. My next tier is good but missing something. Got the Bucks, Warriors, Nuggets, Grizzlies, and Rockets. The Bucks, look, they have Giannis and Dame, so they're going to be entertaining, but I don't think they have the depth to make a run. So they may make a trade. Maybe that fixes it, but they need a little more before I consider them good enough to go win a title. The Warriors are on this clip as well. The Warriors, they just need a second score. That's really what they're missing. Like I mentioned earlier, the Bulls are shopping around Zach LaVine. That's kind of the team that I'm looking for, because Zach LaVine would very much fill that role of second scorer. Steph's awesome, but he alone just isn't enough. The Nuggets, they're in this tier as well. They just need more shooting. They're shooting 39% from 3 as a team, which is, I believe, 4th best in the NBA. But they're last in 3-point attempts per game. So that number has to get up, and they have to keep shooting well. They just need a little bit more shooting, and then you can kind of slide them up into that next tier of championship contender. I've got the Grizzlies. They just need a better second scorer. John Morant also has to start shooting the ball better from three. 29% from three isn't going to cut it. It's just not. I like Desmond Bane, good player, but I just think the Grizzlies need a little bit more offense from their number two scorer. Next, last team in this good but missing a piece tier is the Rockets. Their best player just isn't good enough to win a title. Like, I'm sorry, but you're not winning a title with Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green as your two best players. It's just not going to happen. And then finally, we get to the championship teams, the five teams, the whole thing that we're building up to here, the 25-5. The Celtics, Knicks, Cavaliers, Thunder, and Mavericks. Obviously, the Celtics have to be in this tier. They won the title last year. They brought everybody back. They're 18-4. Porzingis hasn't really even played. And there's really no weak link defensively, which makes them incredibly unique. Like, when you look at the Pacers in the playoffs, like, you know that they're going to attack Halliburton. When you look at the Knicks, you know, teams are going to attack Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. When you look at the Cavaliers, you know, teams are going to attack Darius Garland. Celtics, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are both awesome defenders, and so is everyone else on that roster. So there's really no weak link defensively on that team. The Knicks are in this tier. Karl Anthony Towns has given them a big offensive boost that they needed. He's been really good for them, and he will continue to be. Jalen Brunson continues also to be awesome. The Cavaliers, they have the best record in the NBA at 19-3. And if Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland continue to play as well as they have, they can undoubtedly win the whole thing. Evan Mobley's much better. Jared Allen's awesome on defense, as he continues to be. Did a video on my YouTube channel separate from this morning on Evan Mobley and his development. He's awesome. The Cavs are so much fun to watch. The Thunder, also in this tier, they have the best roster in the Western Conference. They're still kind of young, though. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one of the 5 or 6 best players in the world. Jalen Williams, the guy from Santa Clara, not the guy from Arkansas, he's come along really strong, a really good number 2 scorer. Chet Holmgren, when he's healthy, protects the rim, can handle the ball and do just a lot of cool things. He can play alongside Isaiah Hartenstein, who rebounds, passes, and scores really well with this Thunder team. So they are loaded. Are they better than the Celtics? I don't know, but the Thunder are awesome. Next, you got the Dallas Mavericks. They won the West last year, and they upgraded their 3-and-D guys. Like, it's not Derrick Jones Jr. anymore. It's Najee Marshall, which is a fantastic experience, by the way. Love watching him play. They brought in, what's his name? I can see his face. Klay Thompson, right? More of a 3 guy than he is a D guy, but he can still play defense whenever he needs to. And then they brought in one more guy that I cannot remember the name of. And I can see his face, which kind of bothers me. But they are improved. They still have Luka. They still have Kyrie. I mean, yeah, they're awesome. And when I look at these 5 teams that I think, as of right now, a quarter of the way through the season, tiers are subject to change. Obviously, guys are going to get hurt and all those things. When I look at these 5 teams, though, what is the thing that they all have in common? They all have wings that can score the basketball. Celtics, Tatum and Brown. The Knicks, you got, Towns, but even like Bridges can go score it when he needs to. He's their small forward. OG Anunoby can go score it when he needs to. He's their other wing. The Cavaliers, Donovan Mitchell, I think he's more of a wing than a guard because he's like 6'5". That dude's big. So they have a wing who can go score. The Thunder, SGA's 6'6". Like, he's more of a wing. They got Jalen Williams as well. He's a wing who can really go score it. And then the Mavs, like, Luka Doncic is listed as a guard, but that dude's 6'8", 200 and too many pounds. Like, that guy's a wing as well. So I think that's kind of the thing that you need. And I think the Pacers checked that box with Siakam. They just, as I said earlier, they've got other issues that they need to fix. And I'm going to talk to Tony East about those issues when he comes on here in about 5 minutes. Tony East of Locked On Pacers. He also writes and covers the Fever and the Pacers. Just an awesome guy. Awesome follow on Twitter as well, at Tony R. East. He's set to join me here in about 5 minutes here at 11 o'clock, top of the hour, when we come back from this break.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. It's 11 o'clock. And as promised, Tony East of Locked On Pacers also writes and covers the Fever as well. He's joining the show. Tony, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm freezing cold because I've decided this is the best week of my life to redo my deck. But who cares who I am, because I hear today is a big day on this show.
It is. I guess. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's a big day, but
I think it is.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So for my listeners who don't know, today's my birthday. And it's really interesting. So I don't know. You're engaged, and so I guess I'll ask you. My wife comes from a big, like, we're gonna celebrate your birthday family. I did not. My parents were like, let's all go get dinner, and like that, and that was kind of it. But not my wife's family, like gifts, all those things, and so it's really kind of funny. I think my wife's more excited for my birthday today than I am, which isn't a bad thing. That's just the reality of it. Are you from a big birthday family or no?
Well, I kind of am, but I don't really care about celebrating my own birthday like on the day, so I just kind of go with the flow. I want other people to have fun.
I think that's more so how I am. I will be honest though. I did use my birthday as an excuse to do this NBA 25 and 5 tiers list. Which we'll talk about here at some point, but I do want to ask you first about the Pacers. Let's start with the good stuff. Halliburton goes for 30 the other night on the road, which is a big deal because he'd been bad. Goes for 17 and 8 last night, which is better than he'd been on the road. Why do you think he's been better here as of late?
Yeah, he was good in that homestand last week too. And to me, just like when we were talking and trying to guess, you and I, about what was going on with him even earlier in the season, I said, I guess maybe he's hurt because he didn't kind of have the same wiggle and burst to get past defenders as he did last year, right? When he just could create shots for himself and others as easy as he wanted. I think that's kind of returned. He had a drive against Jakob Poeltl. Now, let me be clear, Jakob Poeltl pretty slow, not the greatest player, but he cooked him, right? Like, true dribble move, boom, boom. He was already a full body past him. That quickly got to the rim and scored. Now it's just 30.9 Toronto. And I'm like, okay, there we go. That, like, he's got some pop, he's got some burst, he's got some gusto. He can get by guys. And that combined with him actually confident enough in his shot to get up threes, not even just make threes, but get them up, right? He took double digits in every game of that homestand last week when he was playing really well, and has continued to do that since. He's taken 10 or more threes every game since they played in Milwaukee. I believe. Oh, that's inaccurate. But he took 10 or more threes in a bunch of those games, 9, 9, and 7 the last 3. He only took 10 twice before that homestand, right? So you can see the confidence with the shot, even though last night it kind of escaped him. You can see him getting by guys and making stuff happen. The passing's been a little better. He just looks better, and it hasn't mattered for their results because not anyone else has really helped them along the way in that starting five. But that's probably more important for the Pacers, that he's looked good than everybody else. They just need it all to click, and it hasn't at all.
No, it has not. And I kind of was hoping that last night would be the night that it all came together. But in true Pacers fashion, they played a bad team and they lost because that's who they are, I guess. But, coming away from the Raptors game, I was like, this team is just so abysmal on defense. Why do you think that is? Is it just the effort, or is there something else that's going on with them?
Honestly, it's kind of hard to say. Like, it feels like they're getting worse, which is weird because they're not a good defensive team anyway. But some of this is injuries. Like, early in the season, they had Nembhard, Nesmith, and Shepherd. And, like, since Ben Shepherd went down, they've been atrocious on defense. But some of it's just, like, day one defense stuff that's just completely falling apart. Communication, rotations. As soon as the pick and roll happens, if the roll man gets by Turner or pressures the rim, there's never anyone back there to rotate down and stop that. And if there is, they rotate incorrectly back out to the shooter to recover. Like, it's just maybe not day one stuff, but stuff in the NBA that is very unique to bad teams that it happens to. And last year, the Pacers had that happen a good amount, but they could cover it up with incredible offense. Well, last night they scored 90 points, right? So even their stuff that is going better isn't enough to overcome just the problems that they're having. They can't do much of anything. And it's hard to say on the defensive end if anything specific is causing it when they've lost three of their best, pick your number, 4, 5, 3 defenders, especially on the perimeter. But the guys playing need to be better, and they haven't at all. It really, to me, feels like a team that is in the bottom 5 of defensive ratings here has gotten worse the last couple of weeks, which is hard to fathom.
It really is. Joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. He also is a beat writer for the Fever and the Pacers as well. You can follow him on Twitter at Tony R. East to keep track of all of his stuff. So obviously getting Aaron Nesmith and Nembhard and Ben Shepherd back at some point will help defensively. How much do you think they'll help the offensive side of the ball? Because like you said, they were able to overcome the awful defense last year with great offense. That hasn't been true this year. The offense hasn't been as good. How much do those guys coming back help with the offense?
Yeah, I don't want to hear anything from anyone about, Andrew Nembhard missed 7 points a game. Yeah, they really missed that. They do really miss that. They really miss that. And what Aaron Nesmith and Ben Shepherd do. One, because it hasn't happened for Nembhard this year, but in general, those guys can shoot it and space it, and people respect them. They can also put it on the floor when there's a crappy closeout and keep the offense moving in a way that, even though their replacements have at times played well. Johnny Furphy was legitimately good last night. He made 4 threes. Quentin Jackson had a stretch of 7-10 days where he was making everything on offense and defending pretty well. Like, that's been important that they've had guys step up and not embarrass themselves. But, those guys can't do everything that they're replacing, right? Nesmith can shoot and beat a closeout, and he's their best perimeter defender with size, and no one is better at sprinting in transition and getting to the corners than he is on this team. And, you don't realize how much that matters till it's not there, right? Andrew Nembhard takes on the best guard assignment every night he's playing, right? And he can put pressure on the rim in a way that no one else can on the team, and lets them play those 2-point guard lineups that they love so much. Nesmith was shooting 54.5% from 3 this year before he went down. I mean, it's only 6 games. That's crazy. And Shepherd filled in great as a 3-and-D guy till he got hurt, right? They just, even though their replacements have been okay or better than expected, and maybe some promise about them being something more in the future, you just can't replace what those guys do, which is why they played so much last year and even this year. And it's been big losses. And don't get me wrong, they're big losses. I don't want to sell them short, but they should still be winning with the players they have in a lot of these games, and they haven't. That's why it's been so weird to cover it. It's yes, injuries are clearly making them worse, but they shouldn't be this much worse.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. And last night, my wife was out of the house from 6 to 10, so I had 4 hours, and I was just looking at stats and all these different things. It was great. And the numbers don't point to this, but when I watch the Pacers, I feel this way. I feel like last year the scoring was really balanced. I don't feel like that's the case as much this year. I feel like the offense is extremely dependent on Siakam and Halliburton kind of making something happen, or a Mathurin drive or something like that. Are you kind of seeing that as well? I just don't feel like the offense is as team-oriented as it was last year.
No, I agree with that. The per-game stats don't show that, right? I think if you just look statistically at it, I think you'd land on no, it's pretty balanced, right? But I think the difference is this year they have a lot of guys averaging, close to similar numbers or whatever. It doesn't feel like it's not balanced, but the difference is it's Halliburton going for 8 points one game and then 30 the next, or Mathurin going for 38 and then 5, or whatever. It's just so ping-ponging around between who's the best and who's the worst that in the aggregate it looks like they're this balanced unit, lots of spread out scoring. 4 guys averaging over 15 points a game, getting 9 or 10 from a couple more. That's great. That's what they were last year. But last year, that's actually what they were getting from those guys every night. Their average was truly, okay, you're outside of Halliburton getting hurt. It was you're getting 21 from Siakam most nights. You're getting 12 from Aaron Nesmith. You're getting 17 from Miles Turner. You're getting what you get from Andrew Nembhard. It happened all the time. They were much more consistent, whereas this year they're way wider, right, in their consistency gaps, which is why they have these great games and everybody says, oh, maybe they're turning a corner. Maybe this guy can be good for a stretch now, and it doesn't happen as it all bounces around. So it's been rough in that way for their balanced perspective. And I hate to bring up a corny CEO, but Jeff Bezos had this thing when he was at Amazon where he would always say, if data and anecdotes don't agree, the anecdotes are usually what's correct. And I think in this case, what you're saying is exactly right, where the data kind of makes it look like they have this balanced offensive attack, but you watch any game and it doesn't feel that way at all. It feels like they need 2 or 3 guys to be heroic to win, and that's been the case in a lot of these games.
Do you think part of that is the personnel? Like before Siakam showed up last year, the only guy that would go one-on-one, I think consistently, and he eventually got hurt, was Mathurin. And so because of that, like guys were just naturally more involved. Whereas this year, like I think it's important for Carlisle to kind of carve out some possessions here and there for Siakam to isolate in the mid post and for Mathurin to have an opportunity to isolate and get to the bucket. Like, do you think that that's part of why the offense feels that way this year?
Yeah, it's been weird because those guys, especially, they're bucket getter types, for lack of like the best term, but they kind of thrive when they like catch, turn, a look, who's guarding me, who's the help going to be, let me figure out where I can drive or where I can attack. And some games, when they're playing a team that isn't connected on defense or is flimsy or their matchup's easy, they look great in that setting, right? Matherin's had a bunch of good games this year, obviously, doing exactly that. Same with Pascal Siakam, right? But for a team that last year, their whole thing was pace and random offense and boom, 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 move, move, move. When that is how it goes, when it gets to those guys and it sticks, even for a second. Like, I'm not saying what they're doing is wrong. They've both played pretty well and probably been their 2 most consistent offensive talents, but it hasn't made the total package as effective, right? Last year, they were second in offense. Right now, they're 21st. The Pacers are at bottom 10 in offense. What? It's crazy. In pace, they're 7th, which is good, but a lot of that's because their defense is so bad that their defensive possessions are really fast. So it's just it's so goofy, right? So they just can't get the same pop and boom and bop as last year. And again, it's good that those players can score in that way. It's part of the reason their record is better than their net rating suggests. Their net rating suggests they should be like a 6 or 7 win team, not a 9 win team. But it's just kind of this clash of, yes, it's really great that those guys are good at scoring in that way. I don't want to take that away from them. It just kind of works against what the style of the team should or could be and is. It's really goofy.
It is like just like you're saying. Joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. Follow him on Twitter at Tony R East to keep track of not only his awesome podcast but also all of the things that he writes on the Fever and the Pacers. So something that I find very interesting about the Pacers this year compared to last year is just like you said, they played faster last year. The ball moved a lot more. It popped around way faster. The Pacers led the NBA in assist to turnover ratio last year. This year, they're 17th. I think that's the number. I got to find it. But the other thing, though, is that you would assume, or I would assume that when you pass the ball less, that you turn the ball over less. And that's not the case. The Pacers are turning the ball over more this year than last year. Why do you think that is?
This is like the most perplexing thing about this team to me, right? And like Rick Carlisle said it before the season, they want to be top or near the top of the league in passes, right? They were great at that last year. And if you look at the raw numbers, this goes back to that Jeff Bezos thing I said, they're passing a lot, 324 times a game. That's second in the league. Like, in my head, that sounds really great, but they're way less effective with what they're actually doing. So last year, they were over 300 passes. They led the league in passes per game. They had 49.6 potential assists per game. So they were passing to somebody who was actually making a shot. This year, more passes, 16 more passes per game, 3.5 less potential assists per night. So what that says to me is a couple things. One is they are passing, but just kind of to pass, like moving around the perimeter, try to get it to someone else who's open, and they're not. So they have to pass again and again. So their passing isn't creating as many advantages as last year. So they have to keep passing, and then they get to a turnover. And some of that is that they have worse talent available, so it's not as easy for them to pass to someone who's actually capable of scoring. And some of that's just that they look broken and disconnected on offense. And at first when they were playing bad and they said, oh, we feel disconnected or whatever, it kind of just hit as like some gobbledygook term to describe how bad they were playing. But now you watch them and it's like, oh, they mean it. Like they have plays where they drive and turn to pass to where they think somebody should be and throw it out of bounds. Like no one's there, like throwing it over someone's head. They don't have that same sense of connectivity of knowing where everybody's going to be and when. And that's really hurt them. I think that what I just said of them passing around the perimeter, not aimlessly, but just without creating any advantages, means that they're opening themselves up for more chances for turnovers. And it's just remarkable to see them go through these games where they have 12 turnovers in a quarter, 14 and 13 minutes against Toronto. It's like you give yourself no chance to win when you're playing that way, not only because you're not getting a shot up, but because you're giving the other team an easy one. So it's just, it keeps snowballing on itself, and they want to keep passing. They just can't do it. It's crazy.
It is. And I think your point on them being disconnected, we saw it last night. Like Mathurin has this turnover where he looks to swing the ball. He just throws the ball without thinking about it to the wing, expecting someone to be there, and nobody was. Halliburton had a steal. He got off in
Hold on. Somebody was there. It was a ref.
That's right. Yeah. And then, even like with Halliburton, he had a steal. He takes off in transition. I don't mind the jump pass. I think the jump pass gives you angles.
I hated that turnover. I hated that play.
It wasn't great. Usually I'm a proponent of the jump pass, but he jumped in the air and just kind of expected someone to be trailing, and nobody was, which I think kind of proves your point of just them not being as connected as they were last year. Joined by Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers, also a beat writer for the Fever and the Pacers as well. So I think the other thing that sticks out to me about the Pacers, and this could also kind of filter into the passing thing, they're taking 5 less threes per game than they were last year at this point. Do you think that part of that is just like Ben Shepherd and Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard aren't playing, or do you think that's kind of filtered into the clunkiness of the offense?
Yeah, what is going on? 26th in 3-point attempts per game. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like last year, they weren't a high volume team. I think they were like 14th or 15th in threes per game, but they were really effective at getting the right guys, the right shots throughout a night, and the three could be a weapon for them in a way that it absolutely isn't this year. Last year, 15th in attempts and 9th in percentage. So they were getting a good volume up of really good shots that they liked and were open. And this year, 26th in volume, and I believe pretty low. Yeah, and despite a pretty good percentage, they're still bottom 10 in making them so a couple things lead into this. One is that their best creator of threes, both for other people and for himself, is Tyrese Halliburton. And he was terrible for, a 10-game stretch, 15-game stretch, whatever you want to say, at both of those things, right? Setting him up for himself and setting up other guys on his team. And so that kind of hurt their volume. They have no one else who could generate a high quality look from three that easily. I think that really hurt them. They were forced to be more of a run team or more of a get stops and run and transition team. And they're not a get stops team usually anyway. So, I mean, that really hurt them, their ability to get up the volume. But now that he's up the volume, they still kind of can't. And it's sort of a personnel thing. Like, don't get me wrong, Ben Matherin's a good catch and shoot player. He's just a very low volume guy because usually when he catches, he wants to turn in his test and not just bomb it away. Pascal Siakam is, to his credit, improved as a shooter and a quick trigger guy this year, but not really someone thinks is a shooter. And their other two starters are Miles Turner, who, yes, is a good pick and pop guy, but you got to get to it. And Quentin Jackson or Johnny Furphy or someone else. It's just they don't have the same level of shooters. They don't have the same level of ability to create those shots with Halliburton. And the biggest thing compared to last year is they had Buddy Hield at this time last year who could just without any action run for him, just kind of run around the floor and get up 9 a game. That hurts their volume too. So personnel, ability, injuries, all of it playing into it. But for a team that dominated the math problem last year, they are not at all dominating the math problem this year.
No, they are not. So earlier in the week, I had to go to a shareholders meeting, and it wasn't great, Tony. And we all said, you said what?
You have to wear a suit?
I did. It wasn't great. So we all met up. We sat around the table, and they're like, guys, I wasn't leading this meeting, but my co-investor was like, guys, I think it might be time for us to sell our stock on Jarris Walker. And I don't know. Like I watch him play, and like he still looks lost sometimes. I feel like when he catches the ball, decisions are never made quickly. Are you kind of seeing that? Is it time to not move on, but I guess to expect less from Jarris Walker?
Yeah, it's weird because his best games are like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
That game against Orlando, he was 7 for 7 and played great defense. Like they do not win. They literally lose that game if he does not play that well. He had 2 games in a row, I thought, this past weekend where I was like, yeah, the blueprint of good Jarris Walker just happened, right? In Memphis, he was quite good. He only took 2 shots, but 9.7 boards, 2 steals, no turnovers. He was awesome. Against Detroit, they were like, you are our best option on Cade Cunningham. And he made 2 threes. So he had 5 steals that night, 10 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds. And I'm like, yes, that is the blueprint for Jarris Walker. And I have to remember, like, he's played 56 games in his career. So it's still early in that way because I didn't play him last year. But that said, I totally agree with you that there's some games where I'm like, what was that? Like, what was the goal of that play? What's he doing? And he has the most head-scratching turnovers on the team to me, where, like, I get exactly what he's doing, and he makes the read that he should make, and it's like, yes, that was great. And then he just throws, like, the laziest pass, and it just gets easily stolen. I'm like, what? Like, just a little pop, a little focus, a little whip on that, and it's a great pass and a great read. That's just weird to me. Like, you don't see that kind of error a lot from guys trying to, like, prove it or figure themselves out in the league. His shot's kind of already better than I thought. He was shooting 37% from three. He's an okay play finisher. His passing's fine. He's actually hitting hard on rebounds this year, which they wanted him to do. Like, all that looks great on paper, but you watch him play and you're like, It's so weird because in his best games, and I made this case last year, even though he wasn't playing, and he's not, playing awesome this year. It's like, if there's a 5% chance Jarris Walker turns into OG Anunoby, like, that's an insanely valuable player. And I don't know that I can get off of that 5% chance based on how he's played. Even though the flashes are so great, when he has these great games, I'm like, yeah, he could be awesome one day. But then he has 2 games in a row where he, can't find the right shot and has an inexplicable turnover, and they get smoked in his minutes. And they need him to be awesome this year because of how hurt they are. And he hasn't. It's been kind of baffling. And it's weird how big the gap is between the best Jarris Walker and the worst Jarris Walker, when especially they need him to be pretty consistent this year.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Joined by Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers. You can follow him on Twitter at Tony R. East to keep track of everything that he's doing. I when I watch him play, I still think that the hardest thing for guys going from college to the NBA, when you're a guy like Jarris Walker, is you go from always having the ball in your hands to having to play off the ball. And yeah, I'm curious because I don't think that they're going to do this. I guess they could. Okay, let me ask you first. What are the chances that the Pacers trade him around the deadline if things don't get better?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the most obvious move to me. Here's the question they're going to have is, should they actually be chasing upgrades this year, right? Like, are they good enough to do that? They're lucky the East stinks. Like, they're 1 win away from being the 8th seed, which makes no sense with how bad they've played. But the East has been awful, so I guess they could squint and say that. But, at what point are they so bad? They're like, oh, we can't trade young guys. Like, we can't chase upgrades this year. But I mean, to me, the interesting part about that is, like, I've been making that point since last summer. Like, the next step for them after getting Siakam, they traded picks away, so it's harder to trade picks now, is trading young guys for another good player. And that's Jarris Walker and or Ben Mathurin. And so if one of those or both, like, if Walker's not popping the way they wanted, but some other team likes his potential or has more opportunity for him, that'd be a natural fit, right? So it certainly makes sense to me. It's something they'll have to talk about and discuss, especially if they have a run at some point where they play well, right? Between now and the trade deadline, which it's hard to even fathom that at this point, but that's 2 months, right? It's possible. Then they could possibly pursue something like, okay, let's chase that upgrade with Jarris this year. But I mean, if they're still 8th, 9th, 10th, that's not a team that should be trading their lottery pick for an upgrade, right? That's a team that should be, unfortunately, for a team that just made the conference finals, kind of going for discovery and hoping they can do something in the postseason, which is kind of the path they're headed on, and hope they can get them to improve down the stretch.
If he was to get traded, I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up at a place where they put the ball in his hands more. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if he made a gigantic leap, because he just seems more comfortable when he has the ball. What do you think the chances are of that?
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And he's talked before about his upbringing, playing like literally every position at IMG Academy at some point. And I think it's a little overblown even by myself in the pros, that like, oh yeah, he played point guard for a year in high school. Like, okay, who cares? It's the NBA now. But he does have like that kind of on ball ability and can read the game. So I think there is more under there, but it's hard on this team to get it all because it's kind of a square peg round hole right now, and they have not figured out how to make it fit.
Yeah, it's an issue. All right, Tony, before I let you go, I want to run you by, I'm going to run my NBA 25-5 by you. All right. So the concept is we're a quarter of the way through the year, which is kind of crazy. Yes. Also, once again, joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. Follow him on Twitter at Tony R. East. So I think there's 25 teams that, as of right now, if they won the title, I would be genuinely surprised.
Okay.
And there are 5 teams that I think are good enough to win the title. Obviously, this is going to change because guys are going to get hurt and all those things. So I won't run you through every team because that would take forever. But so I've got these tiers. So my first tier is bad teams, which is pretty easy to figure out: Wizards, Hornets, Raptors, Jazz, and the Trailblazers. I've got the Pacers one tier up, and I just want to know if I'm being too harsh. I've got this tier. It's called bad but interesting, because the Pacers have been bad, but I think everyone knows the potential that this team has. Is that an appropriate place to have them?
How much better is a 9-14 team than an 8-14 team? Because you had the Blazers in the bottom tier, they're 8-14, and the Pacers are 9-14, right? Like, that's where they're at. That's who they are. The Pistons are 9-15, right? I'm assuming you have them like right in that Pacers tier, and Cade looks awesome. So I get the difference. It's just that their record is what it is at some point, right? And last week they cleaned up at home against bad teams, and that's great. But this road trip, like this month, since I guess November, it's December now. They had this stretch that I circled as like, if they clean up in this stretch, they're going to have a good season. They've lost to Toronto twice in that stretch. They've lost to Brooklyn in this stretch. They lost to Detroit in this stretch. They have Chicago and Charlotte coming up. Who knows how that's going to go? They've already lost to Charlotte this year. They lost to the Ben Carolus Magic, although that looks like an okay game now to lose. They lost to Philly when they were horrible to start the year. Like, they just have some ugly losses already to be like, what tier should they really be in? And they lost these games last year, but they won the good games. This year, they're not winning the good games. So as bad as it could possibly get in terms of results in that way, it's hard to argue they should be up a tier from there.
So my next tier, I have it called entertaining, but not a threat. This is where I have the Pistons just because I like watching them play.
Yeah.
Like, Jaden Ivey's a tank now. Like, that dude's so much bigger than what he was when he was at Purdue. As you said, Cade Cunningham's playing really well this year. It's amazing what happens when you fire Monty Williams and hire a real coach.
Yeah, I can't believe how that went. My God.
Yeah, I've got the Hawks in here too. I don't know how much of the Hawks you've watched, but
5 wins in a row. My Hawks. They look great.
My Hawks. Oh, okay. Nice. All right. Jalen Johnson's awesome. He was awesome last year. Richiche, the least anticipated number 1 overall pick since Anthony Bennett a decade ago. He's good. I don't know if he's ever going to be great, but I think he's good right now. I've got this good but missing something tier. And so for me, that's like the Bucks. I think they need a little more youth and a little more depth. The Warriors, they need a second scorer. The Nuggets need more shooting. The Grizzlies need John Morant to not shoot 29% from 3. And then I've got the Rockets here because I just don't think you said what?
I love the Grizzlies and Rockets this year, but I agree with the Rockets placement.
So the thing with the Rockets, and the reason why I wanted to ask you, is like you said, the trade deadline's like two months away, which is nuts. I just don't think that you can win a title with Sengun and Jalen Green being your 2 best players. Do you think there's going to come do you think an elite player will come available at the trade deadline?
It's hard to say. I mean, all the teams that I would have thought maybe are playing pretty well this year. So I mean, if Phoenix, depending on KD's injury status, I mean, they were a natural thought for me, I guess. Could they Clippers trade Kawhi? But other than that, it's hard for me to envision a team that's going for it and has elite players being like, yeah, let's trade him away, unless you view Nikola Vucevic or Zach LaVine in that way.
Yeah, Vucevic or Zach LaVine.
The best player trade this year could be like a guy the Pacers saw last night, like Cam Johnson. Maybe might be the best player traded this year.
Yeah, and he's just such a great shooter. Anyway. So last tier and then I will let you go. So this is obviously the last tier. These are the 5 teams, I think, a quarter through the year that if I had to bet money on to win a title, I think these are the 5 that I would pick. Boston, that's obvious. The Knicks, they're just a lot better offensively. I have some concerns about backup center, but like I said, like between Bridges and OG Anunoby and these guys, I think defensively they'll be fine. The Thunder, I think they have the best roster in the West. The Mavs, I think they're better than they were last year. And then I have Cleveland as the 5th team here. I think they're awesome. What do you kind of think about those 5?
Yeah, that's the right tier, I think. If I were making this, I would put Memphis in that tier. Memphis has the fourth best point differential in the league. They're really good. I agree with you that Ja's got to shoot. I tried a great article. Ja's not dunking this year. Like, he's really taking care of his finishing and all these little aspects of his game. And, like, they just look really good. They're really deep. But I question their playoff capabilities. They're really good. But, yeah, I think the top three to me is Boston, OKC, Cleveland. And then whatever you think of Dallas. Like, they got PJ Washington back, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, they're really good. oh, yeah, I forgot. So I think that's probably the right five or five of the six for me personally. And Houston is the fifth best point differential in the league. I want to believe. I love all their young dudes, but we've never seen them in the playoffs, so it's hard to say. But, yeah, I think that's the correct top tier.
Okay, cool. I just,
Boston should have their own tier, and then the next four.
What about the Thunder? Because the Thunder's roster, I mean, it's awesome. Like, when Chet comes back, they'll be even better.
That's true, and Hartenstein's been awesome. The perfect connecting piece, defense, everything they really need, right? But just the way they lost last year, like, kind of helplessly, right? The Mavs kind of handled them. And don't get me wrong, I think that there's some shooting variance in that series that really hurt them. I think the Thunder were really good. I feel like Boston's the only team I can put in the yes, you get your own tier group. Boston plays bad, wins by 15. It's remarkable.
Yeah, because they take 53s a game, and they're shooting like 38% from three as a team, which is insane. Insane.
They're very good.
They're loaded, and they don't have like a weak defensive piece. Like, a lot of the team's best offensive players, like the Pacers, their best offensive players, probably Halliburton. You can pick on him defensively. The Celtics don't have that.
Right.
But
totally. And anybody on that team can create and make threes. Turns out that's pretty good.
Yeah, it really does. Tony, thanks for your time, man. As always, you were great, man.
Yep. Thanks for having me, man.
See ya.
Have a good birthday.
Hey, thank you. I will. Thank you. That is Tony East. You can check him out on Twitter at Tony R East. He's got he's the host of the Locked On Pacers podcast as well. He does a great job for them. When we come back here in a couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about the college football playoff. The committee said some things that I don't know if they're telling the truth, and I also don't know if what they said should be the case. I'll get into that when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. I know I am, just having a blast. As always, tomorrow's Friday, conference championship game Saturday, NFL football Sunday, more NFL football tonight. It's going to be a great weekend. And I want to address the College Football Playoff Committee. And I want to talk about the statement that they made where they said that the results of conference championship games will not impact the rankings. First and foremost, I don't believe them at all. Just simply look at Boise State and UNLV. You really want to tell me that if UNLV beats Boise State, that they're going to leave Boise State in the college football playoff? I don't think that they are. Sorry, I just don't. So from that standpoint, I don't believe them. And more importantly, I hope that they're lying. I really do. Like the conference championship games should impact the rankings. They should impact the seeding in these things because every conference championship game is not the same. If you wanted to tell me that the loser of Texas and Georgia wouldn't be impacted that much by losing that game, then I could buy into that. I would support that, actually. If you wanted to tell me that the loser of Oregon and Penn State wouldn't be impacted by losing that game, I would be for that because, you know, like Texas and Georgia are probably two of the four best teams in the country. Like they shouldn't be knocked for losing an extra game that they don't need to solidify their spot in the college football playoff. Oregon and Penn State, I don't know if Penn State's not one of the four best teams in the country, but they're ranked third. They've done enough to earn, you know, teams not being punished for losing to them. The ACC championship game, though, is clearly not on the same level as those two games, and SMU and Clemson's resumes leave something to be desired. Okay, losing to Georgia, Texas, Oregon, or Penn State is very different from losing to three-loss Clemson if you're SMU. And this is a big game for SMU because if SMU loses to Clemson, they should be left out of the college football playoff. Just like how if Boise State loses to UNLV, they should also be left out of the college football playoff. And I don't think it would be unprecedented either if we saw SMU get bounced if they lose to Clemson. Because we already saw the committee give Alabama, 9-3 Alabama, the nod over a two-loss ACC team with a weak schedule, right? We saw them rank Alabama in front of Miami. And SMU's resume and Miami's resume are almost the exact same. Okay, Miami and SMU both have 0 wins over teams that finished the year ranked. Alabama has 3. That is the main reason why the College Football Playoff Committee went with Alabama over Miami. They sat back, they looked at Miami, they're like, oh, you guys haven't beaten anyone ranked. Sorry, we're not going to rank you. And then you look at SMU. SMU's only loss this year has come to the only ranked team that they played, BYU. Miami lost their only game against a ranked team all year, Syracuse. When you look at SMU and Miami, like I said, these resumes are almost identical, and they went with Alabama's over Miami, so I don't know why they wouldn't go with Alabama's over SMU's. But SMU's 2 best wins are over Louisville and Duke, just like how Miami's best wins are over Louisville and Duke. And SMU's 2 best wins, once again, over Louisville and Duke, who were fine teams, don't compare to Alabama's 2 best wins over South Carolina and Georgia. Just like how Miami's 2 best wins over Louisville and Duke didn't compare to Alabama's 2 best wins over South Carolina and Georgia. And as someone who thinks that if SMU loses to Clemson, they should be bounced, my argument is the exact same for why Alabama should have been selected over Miami. Alabama has more ranked wins, and they just have more good wins, period. Alabama's 4th best win is over LSU. If SMU had a win over LSU, that would be their best win. Alabama's 4th best win is better than SMU's than SMU's best win. It's like clearly Alabama has the better resume. And when you look at SMU, if they lose to the 2 best teams that they've played all year, two teams that are ranked in the bottom half of the college football playoff rankings between Clemson and BYU. They do not belong in the top 12. They just don't. So if Clemson if Clemson beats SMU should drop out and Alabama should still be in as, the 11 or 12 seed, depending on where they would put Clemson from there. And honestly, that's what I hope happens really, really badly, honestly. I think that would be amazing. People would be so incredibly upset. It would be awesome. It would be nothing short of incredible. Okay? Like, I would just get on Twitter and I'd put in the search bar, Alabama SMU, and just watch people melt down. Because when you look at the resumes, Alabama's is better than SMU's. No way around it. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, I want to talk a little college basketball, and I want to get you ready for tonight's Thursday night football game, which is going to be the best Thursday night football game of the year. I'm going to tell you why when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice day. I know I am. I've had just an absolute blast today. It has been quite wonderful. Quite wonderful. So, oh, man. The SEC. I feel like I've talked a lot about the SEC today. It's not on purpose. Look, it's not my fault that the Colts have a bye week this week. All right. I sat down on my computer last night and I was like, oh, Colts, let's get ready for a wait. They don't play this week. And this is good news. There's nothing really to discuss about them. Okay. Like for the first time this year, I don't feel like there's a ton of drama. Okay. I don't feel like I have to sit in here and, talk a whole bunch about Anthony Richardson and why he should play over Joe Flacco. And, oh, I can't believe Zaire Franklin said this. And, oh, I can't believe that, blah, blah, blah. I don't have to do any of that, which is a good thing. It really is. But at the same time, I kind of wish there was because it's fun to talk about the Colts. But they don't play this week. But we still have football. We have conference title games in college football starting tomorrow night and obviously all day Saturday. And the NFL week starts tonight. Tonight's Thursday night football game is going to be the best Thursday night football game of the year. And I firmly believe that. Because what happens when Thursday night football games come on? They're always ugly. They're never pretty. It's never good. It's never, ever good. And when you think about why, it's usually because, well, the teams play on Sunday. They have 3 days to get ready, and then they're playing again, right? That's just not a lot of time to get ready for whoever your opponent is, right? That's not the case this week because the Packers and the Lions both played on Thanksgiving. They've had a full week to prepare for tonight's game, which is out of the ordinary for these Thursday night football games. It's also two excellent teams. Okay, the Lions arguably are the best team in the NFL. Meanwhile, the Packers are really good. They're 9-1 when Jordan Love does not turn the ball over. So there you go. What more do you need to know? And so that game should be good. Lions really banged up on defense. I don't think it's going to matter. I still like the Lions tonight. They're still 3-point favorites despite all of those injuries. It's a big divisional game, so both teams should be revved up, ready to go. Packers still have a chance to win that division, and the Lions are trying to stay atop that division. And college basketball is rounding into shape here, and we're starting to learn more and more about these teams. SEC, ACC Challenge finished up last night. We got done with, all the different tournaments, Indiana going to the Bahamas, watching UConn go 0-3 in Maui, and all these things are happening. And, I love when conferences do the challenges. SEC, ACC Challenge wrapped up last night. The SEC won that challenge 14 games to 2. That's pretty good. And the weird thing about it is that the two teams that lost in the SEC might be the two best teams in the conference in Kentucky and Auburn. And as I was watching just kind of everything happen, as I watched Auburn play Duke, and I watched Arkansas beat Miami a couple nights ago, and Vanderbilt beat Virginia Tech, and as I'm watching all these games, my first thought was, this is why it's so important to be good at football, because football makes more money than any other sport. It's just the reality of it. It makes more money, plain and simple. You can sell more tickets. You got more people at the stadium, so they buy more sodas from the concession stand for $10 a pop, and the TV deals for football are way more than they are for college basketball. And so it's really important to be good at football, because at some point, you can have all the new things, which is cool. Like you can have, the newest workout facility and the newest leg machine and all that stuff. But at some point, you just run out of new things to buy for your football program. You run out of things to reinvest that revenue in for your football program, and that extra money It doesn't go to the swim team. It doesn't go to the volleyball teams. It doesn't go to the baseball or the softball teams. It goes to the basketball team because that usually is your second biggest moneymaker within your program. And so the SEC, which I would assume, could be wrong here, makes more money than any other conference from football. Like, they are all of a sudden awesome at basketball because they're able to use that football money and go pay for really good coaches. And whoever has really good coaches tends to win more games. That's just the reality of it. And where the ACC used to be the dominant conference in college basketball, they aren't that anymore. It's the Big Ten who makes more money off of football than the ACC and the SEC. Okay? And so I am tempted to say, I think evidence thus far points to this, I am tempted to say that the SEC is the best basketball conference, but I want to see more from the Big Ten before I plant my flag at midcourt that says the SEC is better than the Big Ten at college basketball. Okay? The Big Ten, I'm just, the reason why I would lean SEC right now is because I just think the SEC is deeper than the Big Ten. Like Illinois, Purdue, Wisconsin, and Oregon are all clearly good. If you match those top four teams up against the four best teams in the SEC, Illinois, Purdue, Wisconsin, and Oregon would win a couple of those games, right? But the depth between the two conferences is what I think is different, right? Like Indiana and Rutgers, and this is why, once again, I want to wait to see before I plant my flag at midcourt. Indiana and Rutgers are both extremely talented. You know, Rutgers has got a couple guys that are going to be lottery picks. Indiana, like, they had the number one ranked transfer class in the country. Mbako is a guy who should be a lottery pick. That guy just knows how to play ball, shoots it big, defends, rebounds, checks a lot of the boxes. Renew, good player. Omar Ballo's supposed to be awesome. He hasn't been. Miles Rice is the next Michael Jordan. They just need him to play like Michael Jordan, and they'll be fine. So Indiana and Rutgers are both talented. They should be some of the better teams in the country. Michigan State's going to be good because it's Tom Izzo. Michigan went on the road and beat Wisconsin the other night. They're going to be really good. And then Ohio State should be good as well. Nebraska, I just kind of expect to be good because Fred Hoiberg's there. Okay, but I don't know. I guess at this point, I would lean SEC being the better basketball conference because I think that I just know more about them than I do the Big Ten as of right now. But I don't think it's a coincidence at all that the two best conferences in the world of football are also the two best basketball conferences now because they just make so much stinking money from football. But now it's going to be really interesting to see how NIL and all these things impact that and how revenue sharing is going to impact that. Are teams, like, are these conferences just going to take all that extra football revenue and just reinvest it in buying players? Is any of that going to go to basketball now? How is this revenue sharing era of college sports going to impact basketball? Because I do think that the success in football impacts the success of basketball just because of the extra money that you have from that success. Thank you for tuning in to The Real Jonathan Smith Show. As always, I greatly, greatly appreciate it. The Dan Dockett Show is coming up from noon to 3. It's going to be great. Got a couple great interviews lined up on that show. Mike Lewis at 1. He's good as always. And then we got another guy, Kevin Long, former Phillies hitting coach. He's coming on at 2. Should be a blast. Should be just an awesome, awesome show. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way here in about 5 minutes. Thank you again for tuning into my show. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon. Friday shows are always a blast. Zach Gray is set to join me. He's going to give out some winning bets. So all of that coming your way tomorrow, but the Dan Dockett Show starts here in 5 minutes.